Express yourself through art and show the world your heart. Express yourself through art and show the world your heart. You're in the know with Esther and Larry. Art on the air today. Stay in the know with Larry and Esther. Art on the air our way. Express yourself through art and show the world your heart. Express yourself.
This is Linda Skidmore.
This is Gail Brown.
This is Jessica Mitros, and we're with String of Pearls, and we want to say... Happy anniversary, happy anniversary, happy anniversary, happy anniversary.
And welcome. You're listening to Art on the Air on WVLP 103.1 FM and on Lakeshore Public Radio 89.1 FM. This is our weekly program covering arts and arts events in Valparaiso and throughout Northwest Indiana. I'm Larry Breckner of New Perspectives Photography, right alongside here with Esther Golden of The Nest in Michigan City.
Aloha, everyone.
We're your hosts for Art on the Air. Underwriters for Art on the Air are Valparaiso University's Brower Museum, regional art patron Mary Levan, and our landlord, Walt Breidinger of Paragon Investments. If you'd like to find out more about leasing space in this historic building, please give Walt a call, 219-462-5821. I'd like to thank them for their generous support. Thanks to Greg Kovach, WVLP's station manager, and Tom Maloney, Vice President, Radio Operations for Lakeshore Public Radio. Art in the Air is supported by an Indiana Arts Commission Arts Project grant through South Shore Arts and is part of the National Endowment for the Arts. If you're interested in being a guest or sending us information about your arts-related event or exhibit, please email us at artontheair.wvlp@gmail.com. That's our program, along with all of our programs, are streaming live at wvlp.org. Art on the Air is rebroadcast on Monday at 5 p.m. Our shows are carried by Lakeshore Public Radio, 89.1 FM, every Sunday at 7 p.m., and you can hear them at lakeshorepublicradio.org. Our entire show archive can be heard at our website, brech.com/AOTA. That's Brech, BRECH.com/AOTA. And make sure to like us on our Facebook page, Art on the Air, WVLP. Art on the Air is always looking for financial support. We'd like to thank our current supporters. If you're looking to support Art on the Air and, of course, the WVLP station, we'd be happy to become part of the WVLP family anytime. Esther and I especially would invite you to become an underwriter of this program in particular. We have information on our website at brech.com/AOTA. You can find out support information there, or at wvlp.org/support. So don't just be a WVLP and Art on the Air listener. Become a supporter or underwriter in whatever amount you're able to do so we continue to bring you great content and this great local programming. And like I say every week, don't give till it hurts. Give till it feels good. And you'll feel so good about supporting Art on the Air. For our Art on the Air Spotlight, we'd like to welcome Dustin Richea. He is the production manager for Indiana Tourism for the Dunes, and also Thad Donovan, who is the director of the motion picture that they're going to send and have a special event coming up at the 49 Theater. Welcome to Art on the Air Spotlight.
Thank you for having us.
Well, Dustin, tell us a little bit about this special event you have coming up, the date, times, and everything, where it's going to be and what it's about.
Sure, thank you. So this is a partnership of Indiana Dunes Tourism in partnership with the National Park Service and Smith Donovan. We're going to be producing a new orientation film for the National Parks Visitor Center, Indiana Dunes Visitor Center off of Highway 49. And this will be on October 8th at 6:30 p.m. at the 49er Drive-In in Valparaiso. So the 49er Drive-In owner actually donated the 49er for us, and we're going to be hosting a fundraiser gala. All proceeds for this event will go to help enhancement projects for the Visitor Center to enhance it for becoming a new national park. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be hosting two videos, a 24-minute video that was produced by Smith Donovan, a local artist here, as well as American Wild National Parks Adventure, and that is narrated by Robert Redford. There will be a cash bar as well as snack boxes provided to all of the customers, and we will have live music presented by Johnny V. Those snack boxes will be provided by Ivy's Bohemia House.
Do you know what's going to be in the snack boxes? What food's going to be in the snack boxes?
The snack box is going to be, it's going to be an assortment of different things. It'll be, but there'll be just like snack foods. So there'll be assorted cheeses, perhaps a warm pretzel, meat sticks, things like that. The menu is not 100% confirmed yet, but that'll be what to expect.
So this video is to replace probably your current orientation video video now that you're a national park. Am I correct?
Correct. Yeah. So this video will replace the current video that is being shown at the visitor center. I like to say around Indiana Dunes tourism is that video is so old, the glasses the Rangers are wearing in it are coming back into style. So we're really excited about this partnership because the national park, if they had done it on their own, it would have cost them upwards of $200,000. But honestly, the artistry is on par with a PBS documentary, if not a National Geographic documentary. And that is mostly due to Thad Donovan and his staff.
And now that you brought up Thad Donovan, Thad, tell us about the production itself, how you approached it and how it's different and how it looks like. So tell us a little bit about the show.
Yeah, so as Dustin alluded to, the current video is quite old and it's been a long time coming to update that. And it was an update not just of the raw content, the story, the message that's being told, but the quality, right? Nowadays, we have access to things like drones where we get amazing aerial footage. And when you see the aerial footage of the dunes, you're going to think this is Yellowstone or Yosemite or something. The dunes look spectacular from the air. And of course, they look spectacular in person on the ground as well. And so, this was over a year-long effort because it requires so much footage. I mean, we have so wonderful shots of the amazing bird migrations, of some of the details at Pinnock Bog, the carnivorous plants that are out there, the flowers that bloom in the spring at Heron Rookery. There's so many things for people to experience firsthand, and we wanted to showcase that. And the only way to do it is just perseverance and just get out there when the sunset, when the lighting is just right. And it's been a lot of fun. It's been super exciting, and I'm so glad that Indiana Dunes and the National Park gave me the privilege of putting this together. We think that everyone that loves the dunes now, you're going to love it even more once you see this video.
Tell us a little bit about your background real quick in filmmaking.
Yeah, so I've been running a marketing company for the last 20 years, Smith Donovan, and we've covered a lot of things from design work to creative campaigns, logo development, websites, but video is the way things are communicated these days. It's the easiest to digest. It's the most dynamic. It's just it's what we're used to, and so this is a perfect project.
Very good. Any future projects you're looking at doing like this?
You know what? That is the perfect leading question, because the National Park video that we're doing is we're working with Indiana Dunes Tourism right now to produce a series of videos that focus on the ecological stories of the Indiana Dunes area. And so, that covers the whole national park, which has many distinct sort of habitats and locations. And we're going to do sort of deep dives into each of those locations. So watch for that in coming months and next year.
Dustin, really quick, give us the rundown of how to get to this and dates.
Sure. So the date is going to be Thursday, October 8th at 6:30 p.m. You can purchase tickets on Eventbrite. The actual name of the Eventbrite event is New Indiana Dunes Nature's Masterpiece Film Premiere. And I'll say that again, New Indiana Dunes Nature's Masterpiece Film Premiere. You can also find this on our website, indianadunes.com, as well as by following us on Facebook at Indiana Dunes.
Okay, we'd like to thank Dustin Richea from the Dunes and Thad Donovan, the filmmaker, for being on Art on the Air Spotlight. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You're listening to Art on the Air, WVLP 103.1 FM, and on Lakeshore Public Radio 89.1 FM. And next on Art on the Air, we have Globe-trotting South African classically trained flautist, composer, producer whose focus is on world and roots music. Among his many awards include 7 South African Music Awards, the equivalent of the Grammy in the United States. His 2014 album, Winds of Samsara, won Best New Age Album Grammy Award. Please welcome flute painter Wouter Kellerman to Art on the Air.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks for having me. I'm really glad to be with you.
So glad to have you. Well, first of all, we just like to get a bit of your background. I always like to call it your early journey, how you got from where you were to where you are, starting out with flute and where you grew up and went to school and things like that. So tell us a little bit about your background, Wouter.
I grew up in Johannesburg in South Africa. And when I was 10 years old, my parents took me to a symphony concert and asked me which instrument I'd like to play. And I liked the idea of using my breath to express myself, like in singing or talking. And my brother chose the clarinet first, so I went with the flute. And my 2 sisters chose the violin. So we were pretty much a very musical family, although my brother and sisters didn't continue until late. They just played for a few years. But I fell in love with the flute immediately. When my first teacher was sick on my first lesson, so I couldn't have a lesson, but we had already rented the flute. And I wasn't allowed to put the flute together because my mom was scared I'm going to break it. So every day I would just open the flute, open the box, and look at the flute, and then close it again.
You didn't just practice with the mouthpiece without putting it together?
I wasn't allowed to touch it. My mom was like, this is so expensive. You cannot touch it until the teacher shows you how to do it. And so by the time the next week, I was raring to go. I just couldn't wait. And I had this amazing teacher that was so encouraging. And from the first day, I just loved it. I just went home and practiced the whole afternoon. And it's just been a kind of a love affair since then.
How many flutes do you have?
I have many flutes. I have my favorite flute is the gold flute, and that's what I play. The one that I practice every day and that I play most of my music with. But I've also got an alto flute, a bass flute, a contrabass flute, which is taller than I am. It's a huge flute, and then I've got the bansuris, the Indian flutes. And
is that the one in the video too? It's sort of a coppery color. There was a flute that seemed to. I didn't know whether it was picking up the colors from where you were or whether it was a different color.
Yeah, basically my flute is a gold flute, the main flute. And so that's coppery, but also my alto and my bass flutes are actually made from copper. So all coppery, but the expensive one is the gold one.
Do you get teased by woodwind players because you have a non-reed instrument in that family of instruments?
I think they're envious. Because
right.
We don't have to deal with reeds and all kinds of humidity and
right.
Issues that. So, and also the way the flutes get played, you have a much more flexibility to make a variety of sounds. On the flute, you can make a beautiful classical sound. You can play a little bit more roughshod and play kind of a jazzy sound, and then you can sing and play. You can beatbox while you flute. We call it flute boxing. There's so many different kinds of sounds that you can make. And
I know you coaxed so many different sounds out of that flute. It was just amazing. It's just
it's
beautiful.
very exciting. It's very
transporting, actually.
Thank you. Yeah, it's like a palette of colors that you have and that you can at your disposal. So I'm very lucky with the flute. Very happy to have played the flute.
So you got your flute at 10 and started lessons. So how'd you move forward from there?
Yes, well, what happened was when I progressed very quickly at school, and I had different teachers. But South Africa didn't have the greatest teachers because, we're kind of a little bit remote in the classical world. So, but I progressed very quickly, and I eventually, and still in school, was in the National Youth Orchestra and principal flute of the National Youth Orchestra. But when I left school, I wanted to study music, but my parents didn't have money to send me to university. So the only way I could get to university was with a bursary. And I was offered a bursary to study engineering because that's my other talent. My two talents are maths and music. And so I went to university studying engineering while still keeping on playing the flute. I actually tried to do the 2 degrees in parallel, music and engineering, but that was just too much to do them, both full time. And so when I left university, I had to work back for my engineering company that sponsored my studies. But I only lasted a year with them, went on my own and decided to be a full-time musician and ran out of money within 6 months.
Yeah.
And went back to engineering. And then a year later, I tried again, ran out of money again, went back to engineering. And then by then I'd started a young family. Things became very expensive. Children can be so expensive to look after. And that carried on for about 20 years. I tried to swap over to be a full-time musician, and it just never worked. I would always run out of money until my daughter kind of finished university. My son was finishing school. Things were a little bit less expensive. I'd already paid off my house, and I tried again, and this time it worked.
Out of curiosity, what kind of engineering was it you did, Wouter?
It was electrical engineering.
Oh.
And so what I did is I actually started my own company in software to give myself the flexibility to play music. So I still kept on playing the flute every day. And every year I would go overseas to do master classes with some of the world's best flute teachers. So I'd go to Europe or the US and have special master classes. And that was my yearly holiday, and then I would still have time at home to practice. But I could only make that final transition in about 2005. Then I started writing my own material, and I crossed over. Up to then, I played mostly classical music. And so I started writing my own material, crossed over to kind of a world roots feel, and then things started to work. And I could actually survive making music, and it's just been a fantastic ride since then.
So what was the first piece that you wrote? What was the flavor of it?
It was this piece called Half Moon, and it's actually probably still one of my most successful pieces, because I have got this little plastic fife. It's a $5 fife. It's supposed to be a training flute, but it makes a beautiful sound. And I love the idea that it doesn't have keys. It's only got holes that you can play on, so you could actually glide your finger on and off the holes to glide between notes. And I just started experimenting with that. And I was with my guitarist. My guitarist is also my yoga teacher, so we would meet twice weekly and we would do yoga and then play music. We started experimenting. We were both clueless with improvising, because my whole background was classical music.
Classical,
yeah. So, but we were both hopeless with improvising. So we felt very comfortable around each other because we were equally bad. So what we did is we would just play anything that comes into our minds, completely random stuff that comes in your mind, and most of it would sound really bad. But every now and then we'd just get lucky and hit on something that sounds pretty nice, and then we'll remember that, we'll record it and move on to, and then finally, slowly over time, pieces started to come together. And it took about 2 years of that for me to write the music for the first album. At that stage, I wasn't even planning an album. It just kind of happened. And so that was my first album, Color, which is actually still one of my best-selling albums.
It's a beautiful transition when you go from playing to then wanting to create the music. I mean, it's a wonderful transition.
Yeah, it was like an adventure to us. It was for a classical musician to walk into the improvising world is quite daunting, because everything you've played before is from a sheet of music, and so
precise.
Right. I mean, yeah, exactly. So, but we loved it and we enjoyed it, and since then it's been a beautiful journey.
What are some of your influences, like flautists that you admire that maybe at least initially influenced you, then later on? Yes,
James Galway was an early, of course, influence, and I just loved his sound. So I would just put the record on and just imitate, try and play exactly like he plays, So he was a very strong influence. I still think he's amazing. A little funny story is I actually met him a few years back. We were both performing at the National Flute Association in the US in Washington, D.C., and we played the same brand of flute. So the flute maker arranged the dinner for all the professional musicians that play his kind of flutes. And I was sitting next to James Galway in the bus on the way to dinner. I said to him, I don't know what it is about Washington, D.C., but whenever I come here, my flute sounds amazing. And I can't figure it out whether it's just the place or maybe it's the humidity or what is it about this place. And he says, I don't know. I don't think it's the humidity. The only thing that makes a big difference to my flute playing is if I switch on my hearing aid.
Wow.
Such a good sense of humor he has.
Any other influences, flute players?
Yes. In the jazz world, Hubert Laws was very influential. Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull.
Okay.
I think
yeah.
The wildness of his
playing. Yeah.
I met him as well. We were both playing at the Blues Fest in Australia 3 years ago, and met him. And I asked him, how did he start playing? Doing all these strange singing and playing techniques and all these things. And he said, well, he couldn't get a proper sound out of the flute. So he had to improvise. So he started singing while playing, and that's where that came from. It's not because that was his idea. It's just because he had no other options. So, but yeah, he's so creative in his techniques, and so he's also been a strong influence.
Well, that sort of sums up the life of an artist, I think. Just you use what you have and manipulate it to work.
Yeah, I think you're very right with that. It's never a sort of a complete picture, and it's kind of just traveling in the dark and finding things.
Now, you played on the Emmy Award film Eye of the Leopard. You were heard on that, and that it's a television film, I believe. So it's an Emmy Award, correct?
Yes, that's right. That was actually my first recording outside of the classical world, because I just started my own. I wanted to record my own album, and I couldn't find a studio that recorded the flute well. Everything sounded absolutely dreadful. And then at the time, I had volunteered my service as a flute player to one of the most amazing singers in South Africa called Nia Nell, because I needed to build experience with the microphones, because I'd played only classical music and I'd never used amplification. And so I volunteered my service, and I said to her, I'll play for you for your show for free. Just give me the chance. And she loved what I did. And so what happened is her producer had to write the music for this documentary, and he asked me to play on it, and he recorded the flute beautifully, and I loved what he did. So I actually went to his studio, wrote down the name of all the equipment that he had and all the settings, and then imported it into South Africa, and since then that's been my setup as well.
So what is your personal practice, your daily practice?
Well, I have a kind of a sort of a daily routine that I go through. I start with long notes, because I think the color of sound is one of my main focus in the flute playing. To me, it's not about the how many notes you can play, but if you can play one note beautifully, to me is much more important than playing a whole barrage of notes. So I, for example, for 6 months when I was younger, I played one note for 6 months. And I said, I'm not going to move to the next note until I'm happy with this note. And I never got happy. I gave up after 6 months. But that's how determined I was to try. And that's how important it is for me to play with a beautiful sound. So I practice I do that first. Then I do my scales and all kinds of technical things. And that's sort of the basis of my daily practice.
Does it matter whether it's inside or outside? Do you mostly practice inside, or do you take it outside as well?
I like to take it outside because
it can breathe.
Yeah, and also the other thing is there's no reverb outside. It's very dry, so you actually sound worse than you do inside. Mm-hmm. So it's nice to practice like that. So when you come inside, you sound amazing. That's the one thing. And then secondly, it's also nice to get a bit of sun. Also, in our world, just to look far into the distance, is good for your eyes and for your well-being.
Well, it's also good for the trees. It's good for the trees and everything outside to hear it as well, I think.
Yeah. So
my grandmother always used to sing to the plants and said that, she felt that helped,
Yeah. So because I spend so much time inside, you're practicing and recording and working on your computer and do promotion and marketing and all that, a lot of insight. So it's just nice to be outside a bit every day.
I really love the one note, because when I teach young children art, we start with one color. Like, how much can you do with just one color? And we stay with one color for a while, and then we move to another color before we start mixing them. So
yes, and it's a very different way of looking at music. And it's quite interesting in the classical world versus the jazz world. In the classical world, the color of the notes are so important, and how you play the phrase. In the jazz world, it's a bit more important which notes you choose. And some jazz musicians don't really care what color, whether they're making a beautiful sound or not. It's more about the notes. Other jazz musicians do both. They're pretty amazing. They play with a beautiful color and they have beautiful direction. But there's something in everything. So in the classical world, there's a lot of improvisation, but you don't improvise with notes. You improvise with colors.
Now, you also played at the World Cup in 2010 for some 700 million people?
That was the FIFA World Cup soccer closing ceremony, and that was one of when I finally made that breakthrough to go full-time, to become a full-time musician. My kids and I were sitting around the kitchen table, and they said to me, "Dad, what would you like to achieve? What are your goals?" And I said, well, the first dream would be to get a Grammy nomination, because that's the biggest prize in music. And in the film world, there's the Oscars, there's the Golden Globes, there's the Cannes Music, the film festival. But in music, there's only one really internationally accepted, recognized prize, and that's the Grammy. But it just felt like a completely impossible dream. And the second one is I wanted to play at the Soccer World Cup closing. I knew it was going to come to South Africa at some stage. So I wanted to play at the opening or closing ceremony, but that was also a completely unlikely dream, because they don't usually choose instrumentalists to perform at these big events. Everything is about vocalists. And so it was really unlikely. But somehow it happened, and it was just one of my proudest moments to be there with South Africa's big moment on the world stage. And there was 83,000 people waiting for the soccer game in the stadium, and 700 million people watching on TV. It was pretty nerve-wracking, though.
So did you then, so this is like a very powerful tool for you. So what are your next goals?
No, I don't have it. My goals now is just to carry on to make beautiful music. That's the main thing. It's always been the same thing. And that's what gets me up in the morning, is to make beautiful music and send it out into the world and hopefully make a difference to someone.
Like I told you before we started the interview, I just became so captivated with Breathe. It just filled me with this beautiful journey. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a solo flute piece that's split between the bass flute and the normal C flute, and I do all kinds of effects, and I do some beatboxing, flute boxing on there as well. And so I've really tried to use all the different colors one can make in that composition.
You're in the jungle. It's wonderful.
You finally did make it to the Grammys in 2014, winning the Best New Age Album with Ricky, who I'm also friends with through the FYC group in the Grammy world. Tell us a little bit about that album that you collaborated on.
Yes, Ricky and I actually got to know each other. I really loved what he had done before, and he happened to love what I did. And we started talking, and we decided to do a song for Mahatma Gandhi and Nelson Mandela, because it turns out that Mahatma Gandhi he spent many of his formative years in South Africa. There's a huge link between South Africa and India like that, because Mahatma Gandhi, I think he spent 20 years in South Africa, and he started this whole movement of peaceful resistance, which Nelson Mandela was very influenced by. So we decided to write these two songs for Nelson Mandela and Mahatma Gandhi. And then we just loved working together. It just worked so beautifully. And then we just carried on working until we finished this album and entered it for the Grammy. And lo and behold, to my amazement, we got nominated. And to me, that was the goal. The nomination was already much more than I could ever dream of. And I remember the night before the Grammys, we were at the Biltmore Hotel in LA, and where everybody gets together around Grammy time. And Peter Cater was there as well. He was nominated as well in the same category. And he had been nominated 8 times before. This was his 9th nomination. He never won. And so I didn't think we would have a chance against someone like him. And he said to me, "Wouter, I hope you have a speech ready, because I think you're going to get it tomorrow." And I didn't even have a speech or anything, because I was just not expecting us. I was just so grateful to be there. So I went back that night and tried to work a little speech. And and the next day, it was just pretty amazing. It was mind-bogglingly, just amazing. It's just a moment I'll never forget.
I know briefly, my first Grammy experience, not having anything in it, was just going when I was a member. That was 1983. And it's just such an experience just going to it. Of course, you'll laugh at this, is the cost of going to the Grammys then was, for a member ticket for 2 of them, was $50 for the actual awards ceremony and to go to the party afterwards. I know it's amazing now what they cost, but and for some reason, me with my little 4-track little recording studio ended up sitting in row 13 with, I'm like, I'm not a celeb, and oh, hi there. So yeah, it was quite an experience. I never have had quite the great seats since then. I went for quite a few years in the 80s there. So
yeah, I've also not been very lucky with good seats, except the 2 years, the 1 year when we won, and the other year we also got nominated. Then you get the better seats.
Right.
But the other year, sometimes you're up there, you're so far, you can't hardly see anything.
Well, and then 2015, you were also nominated for Love Language, correct?
Yeah.
That's still from Still Life for the Grammys?
No, that was so we first won in with Winds of Samsara.
Oh, that's right. Right. And then it's your second one.
We got nominated, but this was in the contemporary instrumental category as well. It's a different category, which is actually very competitive category because all instrumentalists go into that, all instrumental music, violinists, pianists, sax players, everybody's in there. So it's just pretty mind-blowing as well to get that, to get that thing that.
Tell us a little, well, I'd like to listen to something from Love Language. Tell us a little bit about Still Life from Love Language, and we'll take a quick listen to that.
Yeah, that piece is a piece I love. There's a movie called Frida about this beautiful artist, and I just love that song from the movie. So we did our own version of it, and that was basically that.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and take a listen to that from Love Language Still Life with Wouter Kellerman. And that was Wouter Kellerman. That was a Grammy nominated during 2015 called Solo 2 or Still Life from Love Language. Beautiful.
So beautiful.
Thank you.
So in 2017, you collaborated with the Soweto Gospel Choir, and it was a whole different called Symphonic Soweto. So tell us a little bit about that collaboration, which has really got great South African roots.
So gorgeous.
Yes, that's my most South African album. And basically it was to celebrate Nelson Mandela's centenary, because he would have turned 100 that next year. So we created the album, and we actually described the album's called Symphonic Soweto, a tribute to Nelson Mandela. And so it's about his life in Soweto and in South Africa, and about the whole the road that he traveled. And so we had some traditional songs, some of the resistance songs as well that we've covered, and some new compositions as well for him.
Yeah, I love Soweto Travels. That was just, it's kind of hard you can't sit down listening to this album. You just have to dance. Or if you're not dancing, your arms are moving, or it's like.
Yeah, the Soweto Travels we wrote ourselves, and that's one of the music pieces I'm most proud of.
Yeah, I think that was my favorite one. Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's it. Yeah, and it was with us, the Soweto Gospel Choir and the KwaZulu-Natal Philharmonic. So it was a very ambitious project, full choir, full 60-piece orchestra, and it nearly drove me crazy and bankrupt.
Those go together.
Isn't that part of what the arts and music's about? Going, suffering for your art.
Yeah, no, it was. It was a very risky move, to take. And once we started, we you can't stop it, because we just sort of faith, believed in the next step is going to work out, and somehow managed to finish it and make it happen.
Well, I'd like to listen to, I think one of the things that's very indicated is the Mandela medley. Tell us a little bit about that, and we'll play that.
Yes, that's basically two songs that have survived over the last so many decades, and they're both tributes to Nelson Mandela. So we combined these two songs and then arranged it for symphony orchestra, flute, and choir. For each of the songs, there was a different soloist from the choir.
Beautiful. It's a beautiful. Well, let's take a listen to it. Mandela medley from Symphonic Soweto. And that was from Symphonic Soweto, Mandela Medley with Wouter Kellerman from Beautiful. That was 2017. That was just absolutely a great collaboration there, Wouter.
Thank you. Yeah, I just loved working with the choir. And actually, since then, I've been working with choirs very frequently. We've done, after Soweto Gospel Choir, we started working with the Ndlovu Youth Choir. And that's actually a pretty amazing story because we were supposed to do a corporate function and Soweto Gospel Choir was busy. So Tulsi, my manager, was looking for another choir. And we found this choir a few hours outside of Johannesburg in Mutse, like a rural choir, to do this corporate function with us. And we just fell in love with them. They were amazing. They were just... And so I decided to do a song with them. So we covered Ed Sheeran's Shape of You, and we put that on YouTube, and it went viral with many millions of views in a few weeks. Then America's Got Talent saw this clip and then approached the choir and asked them to enter the America's Got Talent. And this was last year, and then they went through the first round, through the second round, all the way to the finals. And
wow.
that made it for them. They came back home. They were complete celebrities. They've got so much work that they cannot keep up. So this little rural choir that had no work, that was struggling, now cannot keep up with all the work. They have to split up and do, part of the choir do the one concert and the part. So it was really beautiful to be part of such a beautiful story for these kids.
So has the choir expanded then, now that more people now are saying, oh, this is a good thing to
so they sometimes they have to do 3 simultaneous gigs, so they split up and do it in 3 different places. So
that collaboration, you just feel the happiness with it. It just it was boundless, the happiness, collaboration.
Exactly, and that's typical of choirs in South Africa. We've got really amazing spirit in the music that you can sense when you listen to them, and it's very difficult not to be swept up by it. Watch it or you listen to it, and
it's impossible not to be swept up by it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Impossible.
Yeah.
Well, along with your work with choirs, you're very much involved with the SOS Children's Village and everything. So tell us a little bit about what you do with that.
Yes, I love kids. Whether it's choirs, but I've just always loved kids. And I feel like an investment in a child is such a good investment to make, because if you can make a difference to a child's life, a solid difference, they carry that into their future and they affect everybody around them and their relationships. And when they have kids, their kids are affected. So it's an investment that carries far into the future. And so about 20 years ago, I started doing research on how's the best way to give back to these kids or to help kids, because in South Africa we've got a huge need. So many kids don't have parents, they abandoned, they live on the streets, or they've got parents that are abusive. So the SOS Children's Villages, I discovered them, they actually create families for kids without families. So they have a house mother and 10 children in a house, and they become family of each other. And that's in a bigger setting of a whole lot of houses together, or in a little village. So these kids have their own family plus an extended family of the other houses around them. And it's just a beautiful project. It actually started off after the Second World War, when so many kids lost their parents in the war. And so I decided I'm going to invest in these kids. So since then, I've been taking care of 10 kids in a house, all their living expenses. And so all my music sales and streaming sales go towards the SOS Children's Villages.
What a great way to give back to community. I know, having worked in education and theater, and I'm actually friends with so many of my students from years ago, all the way back from late 70s, early 80s. And yeah, it's an important thing you never know the mark you make, but occasionally I'll get a note from Facebook, and my nickname's Lab, I want to tell you how much da-da-da meant to me and something. So that's a great thing you're doing there, Wouter. Moving on, I want to talk about something that you've done that was more contemporary covers and a different light, which came out in 2019. Tell us about that album a little bit. And one of my favorites off of that we'll talk about.
Yeah, so basically I started off after Symphonic Soweto, I was so exhausted making big albums And I just thought I'm just going to have fun for a little while and just do whatever song comes up into my mind. So I started doing some really fresh versions of songs that I liked, and started with The Shape of You with the choir, and Ariana Grande's Seven Rings. We did a version of that, and many others. And eventually, when I looked again, we had enough material for an album. So this album wasn't planned. It just kind of happened. And that's basically just doing very fresh versions of favorite songs of mine. And it was just having fun and enjoying that process.
Well, as you know, one of my favorites off of that, and it's also available on YouTube, is your take on the Bohemian Rhapsody, set in like a closed-down bar with your manager actually serving as a waitress, listening on headsets while you guys are, and you appear with multiple flutes in multiple places. So where was that shot?
An exciting video.
Yeah, no, we actually, I played all the vocal, all of Queen's vocal parts. I played all those parts on the flute. Plus, I did Brian May's electrical guitar on the flute. When you listen to the song, it sounds like electrical guitar because I actually put it through, a distortion, the same kind of distortion that he would have put his guitar through. And it actually sounds pretty amazing.
It was amazing. It was amazing.
And I'm playing simultaneous flute. So when we made the video, we were like wondering how are we going to put this on video. And I had working with some amazing video people in South Africa, and they could actually put me on stage next to myself, playing all the different flutes. There's also the contrabass flute there, playing the bass parts. And then it's the night before the shoot, and he says, we need like the person who's cleaning up, who's actually owning closing up her restaurant or her bar. We need someone to play that role, and we couldn't find anybody else. So Tulsi, my manager, said, "Okay, I'll do it." And then the idea was, she walks into her place and she hears the music, but it sounds so real. It feels like we're there. And then I'm standing behind her playing, and when she looks around, suddenly I'm not there. So this whole play on that idea of she's hearing the music, it feels so real, but we're not really there. And that's how the music video came about.
I think I teased her on Facebook. Did she get a modeling fee for working on that? So let's take a listen to Bohemian Rhapsody, Different Light album in 2019. And that was Bohemian Rhapsody, A Different Light, 2019, Wouter Kellerman. And if you haven't seen that, you can look that up on YouTube to see the video. It's tremendous. So
do you work with the same, like all the videos are so wonderful with all the songs that you put out. So are they different? Do you work with different people or the same?
Yes, we work with different people. Nobody really has the appetite to work with us for many because we're so fussy about things, and we always want it. It happens in the music as well that whoever I work with, I pretty much drive them crazy. But they usually, once, because I'm very perfectionistic about the music, and I feel there's so much material that gets released every year that your music, if you're going to release something, it better stand out. It better be super special. So at least you have to absolutely love it to give it to any, to have a chance of that other people will love it. And that's quite a high bar, So the mixing engineers and my fellow musicians normally go crazy, but then once they hear the final product, afterwards they forget about all the problems that we had, and then they always want to work with me again. But in the video world, we try and switch it up a little bit, so it's not one poor videographer and editor that has to suffer with us.
Who endures.
It's different. It's different videographers, and we're also limited in budget. So often we have to. It's expensive to make all this music and all these videos, so it's quite difficult. Sometimes most of the time it's people that will go out of their way because they know it's something artistic, something beautiful that they create with us, and they do it because they're as passionate about it as we are, and that's normally when you get the best results.
Well, and it shows too because they're just so visually beautiful.
Your newest album, We've Known All Times, is sort of a kind of a pandemic created event. Tell us a little bit about the background of that. And it's also I'm hoping going to be nominated for a contemporary instrumental in the Grammys.
Thank you. Basically, I've had this idea to go back to my classical roots, and many of the songs that I've written over time was actually meant as modern classical pieces. And so when the pandemic hit, I suddenly had time to put this album because it's been in my mind for a few years. Finally had time to make this happen, but it was quite a challenge to make it happen. In this distant world, I wrote 3 pieces for flute and piano with my very good friend and composer Wessel van Rensburg. He's based in Amsterdam in Holland, and so we wrote 3 pieces together with the pianist Nadia Shpachenko in mind. And she won the Grammy this year for best classical compendium. And so she's just an amazing pianist, and she said yes. We started with 1 piece, and it looked so good that we actually ended up doing 3 pieces together. And we just released the first video actually 2 days ago. It's called Catching Up, just flute and piano. And then in parallel to that, I was working, one of my favorite composers is the tango composer, Astor Piazzolla, Argentinian tango composer. One of my favorite pieces is called Contrabajissimo. And so I worked with Emilio Sola, who's this amazing pianist. He's also Grammy nominated for his tango work, and his group. And we did it. They're based in New York, actually. And it was a lot of to and fro. I send them files, they send me files, I send them, and I do some more takes, and they do some more takes, and we edit. And, it's been very, very challenging to put it together. But, we finally managed it, and finally the album came together.
Excellent. Well, why don't we take a listen to it? I think the title track is We've Known All Times, and listen to a portion of that right now with Wouter Kellerman from the same album, the same name.
We've known all times, times of sorrow. We've known all times, times of pain. We've known all times, times of sorrow. We've known all times, times of pain.
And from We Known All Times, the title track of the same name, 2020's a contemporary instrumental album, Wouter Kellerman. Beautiful. So
Yeah, just love it.
So just a couple minutes left here, Wouter, how you're surviving the pandemic and what's in the future for you.
You know, the pandemic has been absolutely devastating for musicians because I usually make 90% of my income through live performances, and those have all been cancelled. And it's just been pretty devastating because, you know, over the last few years, musicians have generally moved their model from a sales model to a performance model because we've been making less money from sales. So people were kind of forced to make more money on performing. And now that we've moved across all the way to focus on performing, now all the performances are gone. So it's been devastating financially. It's been good in other ways. Creatively, I think, you know, I've never been this creative. I've created a lot of material and I've started 2 new albums at the same time. And so from that point of view, it's been good, but it's not been an easy time for musicians all over the world. And I think next up, I think is I'll just carry on with being creative and putting the material out there because that's what I enjoy. Actually, that's the part of my job that I enjoy the most is being creative and recording. I count myself as one of the lucky ones because I had 2 pretty good years. I worked super hard, 16-hour days for the last 2 years, and I'm so grateful that I took every single opportunity that I could and that I didn't say no to anything. And I'm very grateful that I did that, and I had a little bit of a reserve to carry me into this difficult times.
Well, we appreciate you coming on Art in the Air. That's Wouter Kellerman, flautist, composer, producer, world and roots music and everything, also known as the Flute Painter. Thank you so much for coming on Art in the Air.
Thank you so much.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Larry and Esther. It was really lovely talking to you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.